The night was meant to be unforgettable. Our 20th wedding anniversary, a milestone built on 2 decades of shared joy, hardships, and victories. I had chosen a restaurant she adored, one of those fancy places we couldn't afford when we were younger but could now comfortably enjoy. Oddly, my wife suggested we take her car that evening. It struck me as unusual since she always insisted I was the better driver. Back then, I brushed it off. Now, I wish I hadn't. Everything seemed normal at first. She looked breathtaking in the emerald green dress I had given her a couple of anniversaries ago. We were talking about the kids, our jobs, and summer plans when an unfamiliar notification sound broke the rhythm of our conversation. She froze. My first instinct was to check my phone, but when I glanced at the dashboard, hers was clearly in view. That's when I spotted it. Another phone partially tucked under her seat. Before I could think, my hand shot down and grabbed it. She didn't have time to stop me. It was an older phone, not the one she usually used. Her face went pale as I turned it on. There was no password, no lock screen. The message popped up instantly, and its words hit me like a gut punch. "I'm already here waiting for you in the WC. Can't wait to have you while your loser husband waits at the table." I stared at the screen, unable to look away, each word cutting deeper than the last. My stomach turned, and my grip on the phone tightened. For a moment, I convinced myself I had read it wrong, that somehow this was all a mistake. But the words didn't change no matter how many times I reread them. Her voice broke the silence. "It's not what you think." I didn't let her finish. Without saying a word, I yanked the steering wheel into a sharp left turn. My thoughts were racing faster than the car itself. My jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. The world outside the windshield blurred, but all I could see was that message, taunting me, dragging me down. Jen, my wife of 20 years, the woman I thought I knew, was beside me, panicking, her voice trembling as she tried to explain. "Please just pull over. It's not what it seems," she begged, her tone desperate. "Not what it seems?" My voice came out louder than I intended, almost a roar. "Then why don't you explain it to me? Tell me why some guy is texting you about screwing in a bathroom while I'm supposed to sit there like a fool eating breadsticks." Her mouth opened, but no words came. That silence told me more than anything she could have said. I first met Jen when we were both in our 20s, at a small-town carnival. I was helping a buddy run the Ferris wheel for some extra cash, and she was there with her friends, laughing like she didn't have a care in the world. The ride jammed, and she got stuck at the top for a good 15 minutes. I climbed up to reassure everyone, grease-stained overalls and all. She joked about my hero moment and handed me her number when she finally got down. For years later, we were married in her parents' backyard. Nothing fancy, but it was perfect for us. Jen had always been everything I thought I wanted in a wife. Smart, funny, beautiful. People used to say we were the couple others envied, and for a long time I believed them. Our kids came a few years later. Daniel, our oldest, is 19 and just started college, majoring in engineering. He's got this incredible work ethic that I've always admired. Chloe, our youngest, is 16 and in her junior year of high school. She's the spitting image of her mom, sharp, bright, and just a little stubborn. I've busted my back for them. Hell, for us. Running a small contracting business means I'm up at dawn and home long after the sun sets, fixing up other people's houses while Jen handled the kids and, more recently, worked part-time as a fitness instructor. It wasn't glamorous, but I thought we were in it together, that we were making it work. Turns out I was wrong. That phone felt like a loaded gun sitting in my lap. I veered into an empty parking lot, threw the car in park, and turned to face her. "Who is he?" I asked, my voice calm but heavy with something I hadn't felt in years. Rage. She folded her arms across her chest like it was some kind of shield. I have no idea what you're talking about. Cut the act, Jen. Who the hell is he? Her eyes flicked toward the window, anywhere but at me. And that's when I knew. She wasn't going to give me the truth. Is this why you're always running off to those yoga retreats? Or why you suddenly needed a second gym membership on the other side of town? I pressed, the puzzle coming together piece by piece. It's not what you think. I cut her off. Like hell it isn't. How long, Jen? How long have you been lying to me? I'm out there killing myself to keep this family running while you're out creeping around like some damn teenager. Her whole demeanor shifted, defensive now, like she was the one who'd been wronged. You're not perfect either. You're always working, Jason. Always too tired or too busy to even notice me. I just stared at her. You've got to be kidding me, I said, barely able to keep my voice steady. You're really going to pin this on me? Her words cut deep, but she wasn't done. Maybe if you actually gave me some attention now and then, we wouldn't be here. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. After everything, sacrificing vacations, pulling overtime to cover Daniel's tuition, skipping nights out so I could drive Chloe to soccer, this was how she chose to repay me. You're unbelievable, I muttered. You've got everything. A roof over your head, 2 kids who adore you, a husband who's given you everything he's got. And this is what you do? Her jaw tightened. You wouldn't understand. No, I don't understand, I said, shaking my head. But you're going to make me understand right now. I glanced down at the phone, scrolling through more texts and pictures I wished I hadn't seen. There were dozens, secret plans, hotel meetups, even candid shots she'd sent him. One photo, though, stopped me cold. It was Daniel's graduation day. The 3 of us stood together, smiling for the camera, while Jen had stepped away to the restroom. The message underneath it read, "Can't wait to see you later. I wore that red dress you like." The same red dress I told her she looked beautiful in that morning. I slammed the phone into the dashboard, cracking the plastic under my fist. How long has this been going on? I growled. She said nothing. How long, Jen? I barked louder this time. Her lips trembled. A few months. A few months? I repeated under my breath, laughing bitterly. Do you even care what this'll do to me? To the kids? They don't need to know, she whispered, tears welling up. That lit something inside me I didn't even know was there. Oh, they're going to know. You think I'm going to sit here and let you drag me through the mud while you play innocent? Tears streaked down her face, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt, fear, or just frustration that brought them on. At that moment, I didn't care. I scrolled through the phone until I found the name. Mark. I glared at her. Who the hell is Mark? Her face crumpled. He's a client from the gym. A client. I leaned back, feeling like the biggest fool in the world. The late nights, the random excuses, the lingerie I stupidly thought was for me. I'd been so damn focused on keeping everything together that I missed the cracks spreading underneath. But not anymore. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone without saying a word. Her eyes widened instantly. What are you doing? She asked, her voice tight with panic. I'm calling Daniel, I replied, cold and steady. Her face drained of color. Jason, no, don't bring the kids into this. Please. I met her eyes, unflinching. You should have thought about that before sneaking around behind my back in the middle of our damn marriage. She lunged toward me, desperate to snatch the phone, but I jerked away. Sit down, Jen, I growled, and something in my tone made it clear I wasn't asking. For the first time that night, I saw real fear in her eyes. Not just fear of losing me, but fear of what came next. And for the first time, I felt like I had control again. I didn't make the call. Not yet. My thumb hovered over Daniel's contact, the screen glaring back at me while I fixed her with a look colder than steel. She sat frozen in the seat beside me, tears running down her cheeks, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. But there wasn't a shred of sympathy left in me. Not after what I'd seen. Not after 2 decades of loyalty shattered in seconds. Give me one reason, I said quietly, my voice trembling. Why I shouldn't burn everything down right now. She didn't answer. I didn't wait for one. I grabbed her secret phone, flipped it open, and started scrolling through the gallery. There it was, Jen and Mark, tangled up in some cheap hotel room, half-dressed and way too comfortable with each other. My hand shook as I selected the images and sent them straight to my phone. What are you doing? She cried, lunging for it again. I shoved her back, my voice coming out in a low snarl. You think you can cheat, lie, humiliate me, and walk away clean? Not this time, Jen. Not anymore. I hit send, and seconds later, my phone buzzed with the incriminating photos. Evidence I couldn't unsee. Her face twisted in horror as she realized the one thing she feared most was now completely out of her hands. When we got home, I didn't speak to her. I walked inside, grabbed my laptop, and locked myself in the office. Rage and adrenaline took over as my hands moved faster than my thoughts. Step 1. I forwarded the messages and photos to Mark's wife. Oh yeah, he had a family too. I remembered meeting her once at some fundraiser Jen dragged me to. Sweet woman, pregnant at the time, glowing as she told me she was Mark's better half. Better half, my ass. I hit send. She deserved to know exactly who she was married to. Step 2. Social media. I wasn't proud of it, but pride was long gone. I uploaded a few of the pictures, just enough to send a message without crossing legal lines, and tagged Jen. The caption was simple: 20 years and this is what I get. Thanks, Jen. It didn't take long for the comments to pour in. Friends, family, even people I hadn't spoken to in years. What the hell happened? I'm so sorry, man. Stay strong. She's not worth it. I didn't care about their pity. This was for Jen. I wanted her to feel the walls closing in, wanted her to choke on the fallout of what she'd done. Around midnight, I heard a soft knock at the office door. Please, she whispered, her voice raw from crying. Can we talk? You're going to destroy me. I swung the door open hard enough to make her stumble. Destroy you? I hissed. Jen, you destroyed me. You tore this family apart. Did you really think I'd just sit back and pretend nothing happened? Her fists balled at her sides, her breathing ragged. I know I messed up, but what you're doing, it's cruel. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. Cruel. I pulled out my phone and brought up that picture from Daniel's graduation, the one of me and the kids smiling, while she'd snuck off. I held it up for her to see. You brought him into this, I said, my voice like ice. Into my life, into our kids' lives. And you have the nerve to call me cruel? Her shoulders sagged, and she dropped onto the couch, hiding her face in her hands. You don't understand, she sobbed. I crossed my arms, patience wearing thin. Then make me understand, Jen. Explain why 20 years and 2 kids weren't enough for you. She wiped at her eyes, her gaze finally meeting mine. Red, swollen, hollow. It wasn't just him, she whispered. I stood there frozen, gripping the back of the chair like it was the only thing keeping me upright. The room seemed to shift slightly beneath me. What? Her words spilled out fast, like she had been holding them in for far too long. Mark wasn't the first, Jason. Okay, there were others. I felt the air leave my lungs. Others. My voice barely sounded like my own. How many? She hesitated, brushing tears from her cheeks. 3. I took a step back, as if the weight of her confession had physically shoved me. 2 decades of marriage reduced to a punchline. Jaw clenched, I walked to the door and grabbed my keys off the counter. Where are you going? She asked, her voice tight with panic. To see Daniel, I replied without looking at her. He deserves to know. Jason, don't do this. Please. She pleaded, desperation rising in her tone. You'll destroy him. My hand gripped the doorknob so tightly my knuckles turned white. I didn't turn around. No, Jen, I said quietly. You already did. The drive to Daniel's dorm stretched on longer than it should have. The low hum of the engine filled the silence as I tried to make sense of everything she had said. 3 affairs. I'd spent years breaking my back to give them everything, and this was how she repaid me. Sneaking around like none of it mattered. When I finally pulled into the parking lot, I just sat there, staring at the entrance to his building with my hands gripping the steering wheel. Was this the right move? Would telling him really help? Or was I just about to destroy whatever image he still had of his mother? After a long breath, I cut the engine and stepped out into the cold night air. My breath hung in front of me as I made my way to his door. A minute passed before he answered, standing there in sweatpants and a hoodie, hair tousled from sleep. Dad? He muttered, rubbing his eyes. What are you doing here? I shifted uncomfortably. Can we talk for a minute? Meanwhile, back at home, Jen sat alone on the couch, staring down at her phone. The comments on social media kept pouring in, each one a relentless reminder of the damage that couldn't be undone. She thought about calling Mark, maybe to scream at him, blame him for dragging her into this mess. But deep down, she knew better. This wasn't just on Mark. Jen had been unhappy for years. At first, she told herself it was because of Jason, his long hours, his exhaustion, how he barely noticed the little things anymore. But the truth was, she didn't know how to be happy with herself. Her affairs weren't about love. Hell, they weren't even about lust. They were about validation. She needed to feel wanted, to feel like someone couldn't resist her. Mark filled that void for a while just like the others had. But it was never enough. She knew it. And now so did Jason. Daniel and I sat in the dorm's small common area. He was pale by the time I finished laying it all out for him. He stared down at the table, fingers combing through his hair in silence. "Why are you telling me this?" he finally asked, his voice trembling. "What am I supposed to do with it?" I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees. "I don't know," I admitted, shaking hands resting between us. "I just thought you deserved to hear the truth." His jaw tensed as he looked up, anger and sadness swirling behind his eyes. "What about Chloe? She doesn't know yet," I said, shaking my head. "But I can't keep this from her, Daniel. I didn't want her to find out from someone else." He exhaled slowly, nodding as his lips pressed into a thin line. "You're tearing the family apart, Dad." "No," I said, my voice soft but firm. "Your mom already did that." Back home, Jen sat alone in the dark. Her phone lay silent for the first time that night, the notifications finally tapering off. All that remained was the weight of the silence. And for the first time, she understood. This wasn't just about her and me. This was about Daniel, Chloe, and the family we had spent years building. And now it was gone. But the damage was already done. By the time I got home, it was creeping past 2 a.m. The house was still, carrying that heavy kind of silence that follows something breaking. Something you know can't be put back together. Jen hadn't moved. She was still on the couch, the crumpled anniversary dress pooling around her like a reminder of everything we'd lost. Her phone lay face down beside her, dark and quiet. "How did Daniel take it?" she asked softly, not bothering to lift her head. I lingered in the doorway, arms crossed over my chest. "He's hurt, confused, angry, just like me. But at least now he knows." She dropped her face into her hands, voice muffled and brittle. "Please don't tell Chloe. She's just a kid." "She's 16, Jen," I shot back. "She's old enough to see what's going on, whether we explain it or not. You think she won't notice when you're suddenly not around? When holidays start splitting between two houses?" She winced but stayed quiet. I didn't care. If she wanted to wallow in guilt, that was on her. But she wasn't going to twist this into something it wasn't. Not this time. The next morning, I sat at the kitchen table, cradling a cup of coffee and waiting for Chloe to wake up. I could feel Jen hovering nearby, just out of sight, probably pacing. I didn't have to see her to know how anxious she was. The weight of what was coming hung thick in the air between us. Eventually, Chloe shuffled into the kitchen, her hair wild, still half asleep. She grabbed a bowl from the cabinet and poured cereal without much thought, barely glancing at me as she sat down across the table. "Morning, kiddo," I said, setting my mug aside. She paused, spoon halfway to her mouth. "Hey, what's up?" I exhaled slowly, rolling the words around in my head, trying to find the least painful way to say them. "How do you tell your daughter that life as she knows it is about to fall apart?" "Your mom and I began carefully, folding my hands together. "We're going through some things, and it's going to change how things look around here." Her brow knitted. "What do you mean?" I hesitated. "We might be getting a divorce." The spoon slipped from her fingers and clattered into the bowl, milk sloshing over the edge. She stared at me, eyes searching my face for something. Some kind of reassurance, some hint that maybe I wasn't serious. "Why?" Her voice wavered. I shifted in my seat, fingers tapping lightly on the table. Your mom. She made some choices, I said, my tone soft but steady. Choices that hurt our family, and we can't undo them. She blinked quickly, trying to process. What kind of choices? I couldn't bring myself to tell her everything. Not yet. It's complicated, I said gently, leaning forward. But I need you to understand, this isn't your fault. None of it. And no matter what happens, I'm not going anywhere. I'll always be here for you. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she shook her head, pushing her chair back suddenly. I need some time, Dad. I reached out, trying to take her hand, but she pulled away, snatching her phone and disappearing down the hall. As her door clicked shut, Jen stepped out from the shadows, her eyes red and swollen. I told you she didn't need to hear it, she whispered, voice trembling. I turned, facing her head on. She deserves the truth. Both of them do. You don't get to hide from this, Jen. Not anymore. Her lips tightened, but she didn't argue. That evening, Daniel showed up at the house without me asking him to. He stood in the doorway, staring at Jen for a long, tense moment, disbelief written all over his face. I can't believe you, he said, his voice raw with disappointment. Daniel, she started, but he cut her off. Don't, he snapped. You don't get to explain this away. He stormed up the stairs, leaving Jen standing there, shoulders sagging, tears streaming down her face. I didn't comfort her. Couldn't. Chloe barely spoke a word at dinner. She ate in her room, and that bright, bubbly energy she usually carried felt like it had drained right out of her. I'd seen her upset before, but this was different. This was heavier. By the end of the week, I filed for divorce. But the hardest part wasn't signing the papers. It was what followed, the fallout we couldn't stop. Mark's wife didn't just confront him. She took everything public. Screenshots, texts, even the pictures. She blasted it all over social media, tagging Jen, Mark, and the gym in every single post. And in our small town, it spread like wildfire. Everywhere Jen went, the stares followed. The whispers trailed close behind. Moms at Chloe's school. Women who used to laugh with her at fundraisers and praise her for being so involved, now avoided her like she carried something contagious. The gym didn't waste any time cutting ties. They said it was to protect their reputation, but everyone knew why. As for Mark, he vanished as quickly as the scandal erupted, leaving Jen to deal with the wreckage alone. She pleaded for counseling, for another shot at saving what was left, but it was far too late. The love? Gone. The trust? Destroyed. The respect? A faint echo of the past. When the day came for her to leave, she looked like a shadow of the woman I once loved. Her movements were mechanical as she loaded her bags into the car. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed, watching her silently. Chloe stayed holed up in her room, headphones on, blocking out the world. Daniel sat on the porch, his back to her, refusing to even acknowledge her presence. As she drove off, I didn't feel the relief I thought I would. There was no sense of victory, no satisfaction, just emptiness. It's been 6 months since then. The divorce is finalized. Daniel's adjusted for the most part, though his relationship with Jen remains distant, strained at best. Chloe's been seeing a therapist, trying to piece herself back together, to rebuild the confidence that crumbled alongside our family. And me? I'm learning how to move forward, step by step. I've thrown myself into my work, into being the kind of father my kids can rely on. Most days, I'm just trying to figure out who I am now, who I was before Jen's betrayal turned my world upside down. Sometimes, late at night, I think about the man I used to be, the one who believed in things like soulmates and forever, in happy endings that were meant to last. That man doesn't exist anymore, but I'm still here, and for now, that's enough.